So you've got your emotional center, and you know now that this is a story about loss. So how does what's the next step? Does one of you sit down and take a pass at this? Do you go have lunch someplace and start hashing out the details? Joshua, how do you get started?
I mean, Don is, one of the ways in which we're similar is I think we're both pathological outliners. And Don is also charmingly addicted to a piece of software called SCRIVNER.
Can't say enough great things about SCRIVNER.
I understand. I hope they're listening right now and understand the love flowing their way. But, what it is it's essentially a bullet pointed list of the story, element by element, scene by scene. And it starts with, as silly as it sounds, just 2 or 3 bullet points, and we just keep adding and we keep adding and we keep adding. And most of that work is done together, if not physically together because of, the apocalypse, then together via screen share. And then, we essentially have a to-do list. It's like, oh, cool. Now we have our list of scenes. Now, SCRIVNER allows this wonderful color coding, so that, you can start checking stuff off, and Don will do some, I'll do some, we'll swap. Sometimes we'll write at the same time. But, by the time we've actually started writing traditional scenes, like it feels like we're on draft 3 or 4, because the discussions and the ideations have spent so much time in the oven. We've talked about stuff so much, that in some ways getting it onto the actual page is not the hardest part. It's, everything has kind of been built.
If I could just talk about SCRIVNER, because I do think it is, it's an amazing piece of software. I don't know the guy. I'm not at all represented by it. I don't have any connection to the company other than just as a consumer. But I worked at E when they were still doing non-linear mastering of their shows, which is linear mastering, where like if you change something in the show, you had to go in and lay it down again and put the piece in, which is like when non-linear edit, that's like basically you're editing film, you're cutting it, you're pasting it to the piece. And when non-linear editing came around, it transformed editorial. You can now just take a clip and slide it in the middle of something and stretch it out, and you can do, and writing is still, most writing software still exists in that linear format. It's Final Draft, it's Microsoft Word. It's like you're writing and it's in this beginning to end format. And what SCRIVNER does is it really is like non-linear editing for writing. And it breaks down your story into little pieces, and the pieces can be rearranged, and the pieces are scenes, or the pieces are sequences, or whatever you want them to be. I personally break down the scenes. And as someone who's sort of struggled with ADHD my whole life, which I do believe is both a handicap and a superpower, it has taken my time for writing a draft from, I used to struggle with studio assignments because I couldn't finish a draft in the weeks they had allotted me. And I can now write a draft of a screenplay in just a few weeks. I think partly because of this program, because it's so lays out and delivers. And it's also has a great tool for collecting information, references. You can put web pages in it, you can put pictures in it, it's just this amazing piece of software. Now, it's very intimidating. I think Josh is a little bit overwhelmed by all the bells and whistles on this thing. And I keep telling him to try to, once you learn it, you're sort of in it. But it's, I can't say enough about how it's transformed my workflow and how much I think, I was on the beta team of the Final Draft software, and they asked me so I would get the early versions. I'm not on it anymore, but they would ask me what should we do to make this thing better? And I was like, you should buy SCRIVNER. But again, that would probably ruin SCRIVNER, and SCRIVNER interfaces with Final Draft. But I can't say enough about it. Like, if I'm just going to be writer geek and talk about the tools that we have, that is, I think, a quantum leap from anything else in the marketplace as far as helping you organize and execute your ideas in a fashion that, is efficient.
SCRIVNER, I'm assuming you listen each and every week. You heard it. I think you should hook Don Handfield up with some kind of free program for such as I have. And you know what? Can you come up enough on this show? You should hook me up too. And Joshua was here the whole time. All 3 of us. Hook us up with I don't know, give us a free copy of SCRIVNER.
I'm good. The other thing to say about it is just it's affordable. It's not like Final Draft is usually expensive. Microsoft Word's usually expensive. This guy who created this, I think, was a writer. I think it's like $30 for this program. It's like very, very inexpensive, and I can't say enough about it. I proselytize about very few things, and one of them is Scrivener. So
No, it's and I will say, because I don't use Scrivener on every single project, I use it kind of uniquely in my collaborations with Don. And just in terms of the question, which was, you know, how does your process work? Like, Scrivener is, like, to this day on the project, it's the Bible. Like, any question, like the history of any idea, because it's so modular, because it's saving so many drafts. Like, when I open up that file, you know, if Don is like, oh, how did that scene work 10 drafts ago? That's a really easy thing to reference. Where did the scene used to go? That's a really easy thing to reference.
That's the other thing to mention is that, and this is becoming an infomercial for Scrivener, but that's the other thing to mention is that you can actually snapshot scenes as you change them. So if I change a scene, I can take a snapshot of the old version. So when I go back into that scene, if I'm like, what was it like 3 versions ago? And look, I'm not always that organized. I'm always combining scenes and pushing them around, but there is a utility to do that, which is pretty amazing and useful. And you know, and look, anyone who's written any screenplay in Final Draft knows that when you're trying to restructure, you have to open 4 documents. Here's my new document. I'm going to cut and paste this thing and slide it in and just keep it there for a second. And you're juggling all these documents. You have to remember where things went. And that's often what would kind of, for me, with the ADD, that would sort of clog the works, where I'm like, where was that again? Where does that go? And how do I, and this is just breaks them down in little pieces. So it's very simple, and you can color code as you work through. And if you have 20 minutes, you can go and look at all the little scenes you have to do and find a small one and work on it, and then change the color when you're done with it. And you just see yourself chipping away at this. I mean, I used to take 12 weeks to write a screenplay. I can write one in 3 because of this program. So can't say enough about it.
I'm convinced. You heard him, Scrivener. Get us our free swag.
Yeah.
We want Scrivener t-shirts by the end of the week. Come on.
Exactly. Yeah. Scrivener trucker hat. I'll wear it everywhere.
So so that's great for the bullet points. You figure out what are the scenes that we need to tell this story. So I'm assuming by that point you've got your beginning, middle, and end. You know who all the major characters are going to be and what their motivations are going to be. So when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, let's write the individual dialogue. Do you do that back and forth? Does one of you sit down and do a draft and then the other one gets on top of it? Joshua, how do you handle that?
I mean, a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's a trade-off. Very often it's you know, me over Don's shoulder as he's typing, and we're just literally talking it through, like in real time, as though transcribing a conversation. It's kind of nutty. It's a weird thing to eavesdrop on. Like, I'm so glad my wife isn't here to talk about like what that looks like for as a third party. But it's you know, and to be honest, I mean, and just to pay Don a compliment, like, that's a really hard thing to do. You know, like, it's certainly something that I've attempted to mimic with other people, and it fails more often than it works, you know, to like really, you know, be head to head with somebody for 6 or 7 hours at a stretch, and kind of like, you know, talking out imaginary unicorn lore very passionately for that entire duration. It takes a unique dedication. So, you know, like, but that's how it would work more often than not.
Yeah, it's hard to find solid collaborators you can both stand in a room that long and that you can creatively work with. And I've been fortunate to have done it a few times, but it's not easy. You kind of realize it can't be replicated with everyone, and it is sort of a gift when it happens. My partner on Knightfall is an English writer named Richard Rayner, and when we started working together, he was very English and very polite about everything. And I would be typing, and he would be like, "Don, I think we should." You know, you kind of beat around the bush, and I'm very sort of American and straightforward. So I was like, look, dude, you don't like something, you just got to break it down. You can't beat around the bush and be all soft about it and be all English. Just, we're going to be working together. Just, if you don't like it, just hit me with it. And so he was like, okay. And then, like, after 2 days of that, I would be like wanting to cry in the corner. And I was like, look, you got to put just a little bit back, just a little bit of the kindness back in your notes. You're going to kill me. But you know, so it's always a medium. It's always finding a balance, and obviously the fact that Josh have a friendship and enjoy our company really helps. And and he's a great, the reason I like to collaborate is both as someone with ADHD, there's something called the body in the room, which just having another person in the room helps you focus. That's a big part of it. But the other part is that when you write something by yourself, it's hard to tell if it's good or not, because you're the only person listening to what you wrote. So you're both the writer and the reader. And it's really hard to determine whether what you wrote is excellent, okay, or poor, or just bad. And oftentimes for me as a writer, I'll have to put it on a shelf for 4 to 6 weeks and go back to it with fresh eyes and then read it and be like, oh, this is good, or this is bad. And when you have a writing partner there, it's usually that 4 to 6 week process happens instantaneously. So you sort of get an opportunity it just speeds the plow, and as far as like getting to a good story.